Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Father-Son Packers podcast, your news source for Packers news, notes, and analysis, bringing you here a pregame for the Packers matchup against the Vikings this weekend in Week 17. And I am joined, as always, by my co-host, my dad, Matt. Dad, how are you doing?
All right. We just finished a 10.5 hour drive that should have been 8 hours. But other than that, it's been a great day.
Yes, we have just made quite the trip from the Bay Area back down to Southern California. So apologies that this podcast is coming to you a bit later than usual, but we still wanted to get it out to you. Been a bit hectic traveling for the holidays, but we're still going to bring you two a week every single week like we always do. I am Tommy. I am your, other co-host, I guess we would say, the younger, more good-looking co-host. But as we go,
if you're good-looking, you know who you have to thank for that.
All right, Mom. And you know what the right answer is.
You're right.
And you know what the right answer is. But anyway, let's get into this pregame. But before we do, just a couple news and notes, Dad. What's been going on for the Packers this past week? Quite a few moves. Relatively for this time of year, at least.
Yep. So Lowry had to leave the last game with a calf injury, and they moved him to IR. And so the earliest he would be able to return would be the NFC Championship game. And to fill that spot, they signed wide receiver Bo Melton off of the Seahawks practice squad. He was a 2022 draft pick. A slightly undersized but speedy receiver with a 4.34 40-yard time. Mm-hmm. And then they released Tipa Nalei with an injury designation off of the injured reserve.
Could not quite get back to getting healthy this year for Tipa. And it also sucks for Lowry. He had some really good streak going of it was a bunch of straight games. I don't think he'd missed a game from injury in quite a while for the Packers. But it's going to be tough. You know, they do have some depth along the D-line, so it's at least you got that. But it's tough because it might also be the last time we've seen Dean Lowry play for the Packers, which is always a tough pill to swallow.
We'll just have to make sure we get to the NFC Championship game.
You make some good points. Melton, I think, mostly going to be a special teamer, I would imagine. Gunner.
He also did some returning in college at Rutgers, as well as being a receiver.
Yeah, and I feel like that's, with Nixon kind of struggling with injury, which we'll talk about in a second, it's nice that they're actually having some options at returner, as opposed to before they had zero options. Just nice little change of pace here for us. But anyway, getting into the game breakdown itself, we're going to start with what we always start with, which is the injury report. Looking pretty clean for both teams, besides like what we just talked about with Lowry moving to IR. For the Packers, only two players are carrying designations into the weekend, and that is the aforementioned Keyshawn Nixon, who is questionable. However, Dad, I would be surprised if he played because he did not practice any of the practices this week for the Packers.
You're saying he's questionably questionable?
Questionably questionable. He did go through warm-ups on Friday with the team. I saw tweeted out by several Packers beat reporters. But I think the fact that he didn't get a full practice in wasn't even limited. He was listed as a DNP. Kind of a groin injury as well, soft tissue injury. Seems like it's not going to...
Yeah, sudden sprinting is not so good.
Yeah, it seems like they're going to take a hit, both at the return front. I mean, he's been the best returner in the league. I think that's at least arguable. I think, obviously, there's several good returners in the league, but I think you could certainly make the argument he's one of the best, if not the best. And then also, he's been their starting slot corner for, 5-6 straight weeks now. Maybe even longer, now that I think about it. Pretty much ever since Stokes went out.
Yeah, it's going to take several people to replacement. I'd be surprised if they had Melton jump right into return duties in his first week with the team. So it'd probably be like Dobbs and Cobb, kind of committee.
Yeah, I would
take over Nixon's role. And
it seems like Dobbs on kick returns, Cobb on punt returns is probably going to be what they go with.
The slot corner that's going to take a little bit more work to figure out who it's going to be. Maybe it'll be Savage.
Maybe, it seems like, we'll talk about in a second, but it seems like they were putting Savage back at safety a little more after they either benched Ford or he was hurt. He was on the injury report this week, not on the final injury report, but he was on the list with let me double check, with a wrist and knee injury, but he did practice in full all 3 days this week, so tough to tell if he was benched and they just decided to go with Savage, or if he was feeling that injury and then felt better during the week, hard to tell. They did end up doing a lot of Innis Gaines and Tariq Carpenter at slot, which was, I think,
were they
kind
at
of
slot or were they at safety?
I think they were playing them in the slot a little bit, if I remember correctly.
I was ask who was in the slot after Nixon went out. I think I had missed who was filling in there.
I thought I saw that they were playing in the slot a little bit when I was watching. I wouldn't be surprised if they brought Savage down as well to do some of that. But yeah, so that's the Nixon injury and kind of how we think that might impact this game. And then Christian Watson is also questionable. He did not practice on Wednesday or Thursday, but he was a limited participant on Friday. Dad going to be really big. They really need him, I think, for this game because the Vikings are a team that can score a lot of points, and you got to keep pace with them.
Yeah, and when Watson's availability just changes the dynamic of the offense and what they're able to, how they're able to stress the opposing defense and create opportunities for other players as well as himself. And
not only as a deep threat, he's pretty much the only one that they consistently run any kind of motion with. The whole offense seems to change. I mean, what was it last year? LaFleur would talk about how the offense completely changed when Lazard wouldn't play because he'd have to take out chunks of the playbook for not having as good of a blocking receiver. Feels like the same thing with Watson. It's just like chunks of the offense do not work, and they don't even run them when Watson isn't playing. They don't run any motion. They don't have really anyone who can stretch the top off the defense, although when you're playing against this version of the Vikings defense that we'll talk about is a little older, a little slower. Maybe you could still get away with that with Dobbs and Lazard.
Take a little less speed to stretch them.
Yeah, but I think that they really need Watson to win this game, and so keeping an eye on his availability, like we said, questionable going into this game. Going to be something to watch. However, they are the only two who are taking an injury designation into the weekend. So that means Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, and Yosh Nijman are all not carrying designations into the weekend. And Dad, that was something we talked about in the post game from the Dolphins game that was, especially with Nijman, was going to be one that we wanted to keep an eye on because he got knocked out of that game. Vikings have quite the pair of edge rushers, and they're going to need both their tackles on their A game this weekend.
Right. It's going to be nice to have, it looks like their preferred starting line for this week. And have Bakhtiari, who's, when he's available, been playing really well, and Nijman's been playing well. And I think they're going to need them rather than have the less experienced and not as stout tackles that, though Tom has been playing well, I think he'd be susceptible to a power rush.
Yeah.
Say Z might put on him.
I was going to say Z is the type of rusher that I would think he would struggle with, just size and strength. And I mean, I think Tom can eventually take care of that kind of assignment, but I think right now he's barely touching 300 pounds. So I think that might be tough.
Tom does better with managing rushers who are trying to run around him.
Yeah.
And directing them around the quarterback and standing them up. But Z is best moves, sort of like the half-man bull rush, to try to go through your face.
Yeah.
As it were. And that might be a weakness of Tom's right now. But I think, that is the strength of their rush, though they can get some up the middle too with Dalvin Tomlinson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a nice player.
He's got a little bit pass rush juice as well.
Yeah. And
one thing I wanted to say about these injury reports, so, Aaron Jones doesn't carry any designation.
He still hurt
last week either.
Yeah.
I mean,
he didn't last week. He was limited all week. He was limited participant in all three practices this week, limited participant in all three practices last week, didn't carry a designation in last week, didn't carry a designation in this week, and last week you could tell he's not 100%.
He's definitely seemed to be on some kind of snap count because he did not play very many snaps.
And they're working his leg out.
A few weeks now.
They're working his leg out on the sideline. They're wrapping up his ankles, And
right, I think so. They've had to stop, take him out in the middle of the game so he can rewrap his ankle.
Yeah, I mean and you can tell he's not hitting the holes. He has a couple nice runs a game.
That 18-yard run around the right side late in the game looked good.
Yeah, it seems like he's not having as much success running up the middle as he did earlier in the year. I don't know if that's just I'm not thinking of any, or if it's just a sample size thing.
Yeah, I don't know, and I haven't been paying attention closely enough to know if that's how effectively they're being blocked. I just don't. I can't answer that question.
Yeah, I was going to say their tackles are better than their interior right now, to be fair. But it does seem like he's not 100%. He's not playing quite as impactful football as he was earlier in the year when he was pretty much the whole offense. I don't think he could be the whole offense if you needed him to be right now, which is another reason why you really need Watson to be out there. But yeah, so those are the injury designations for the Packers. Going over to the Vikings, also a fairly clean report, but they do have their starting center, Garrett Bradbury, is going to be out for this game. And then one of their D linemen, James Lynch, is also going to be out for this game. I think the Bradbury one is significantly more impactful. However, I will say when he does play, Kenny usually dogs him. So
yeah, but I was looking; he's having a better year this year, at least by PFF grade. It's actually been better than Myers. Though Kenny has had his number, he has just kind of owned him.
Well, the thing is, he's a smaller center. He's more of a finesse guy. He's more of the type to, like, he's more of a run blocking center. More of that like zone offense type center, and I think that Kevin O'Connell offense is very good for him, especially in the run game. But he's a smaller guy, and Kenny has bullied him the past few years, but he is not going to play in this game, so they are going to be with their backups. I don't think it's going to make the biggest difference, but just with the way that matchup has gone in the past when he has played, but just something to keep an eye on. Dad, did you have anything else that you wanted to take a peek at the injury report before we move on to the meat and potatoes?
No, I think we're ready to move on.
All right, cool. Let's start with, we'd like to do every week with our preview, especially in divisional games, our blast from the past. And Dad, these teams played in week 1, and it did not go very well.
Nope.
To say the least, it did not go very well.
It was just another week 1,
well,
disaster.
Here's the thing. I would love to travel back to that time when I was like, oh, this is just, the Packers are always bad in week 1. But nope, the Packers were just not very good at the start of the year at all.
Nope, they lost this game 23-7 as they almost totally failed to guard Justin Jefferson at all. He had 184 yards and 2 touchdowns, and as there was a lot of sort of, I don't know, they're acting out the Spider-Man meme as the Packers defensive backs are pointing at each other.
Like, you?
Was that you? No, was that you?
That was me. That was you? I remember thinking at the time, too, it was like week 1, I was like, week 1, they're still trying to get, like, the communication done. Week 2, they're still trying to get the communication. Week 3, they're still trying to get the communication. And that continued for quite a little while. They've kind of cleaned it up a little bit, although you could see that Jalen Waddle play last week, 84 yards, bad communication yet again. But yeah, back in week 1 when we thought it was just another week 1 aberration. What sweet summer children we were back then, huh, Dad?
Yes, everything was
peaches and cream.
And there was the season was in front of us, full of hope and promise.
Hope, promise, and opportunity, and now it's behind us, and
then
full of regret and sadness.
Rodgers got sacked 4 times with Hansen and Newman blocking on the right side.
Imagine going into week 1 and being like, "This is it. This is the O-line we want out there." Like, what were we thinking? Yep. What was the plan?
I don't know.
What was the plan?
So the Packers' offensive line is going to be way better now than it was then.
Should be
we
much
didn't
better.
Have we didn't have Jenkins.
True.
We didn't have Bakhtiari.
Very true.
And so we had, instead of them, we had Hansen and Newman.
Yeah, you make some good
points. And
points.
both of them next to each other on the same side.
But other than that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? I mean,
Pretty much.
it was a disaster in the secondary that week. It was a disaster along the offensive line. They couldn't do much of anything. Christian Watson had the opportunity to start his season off with a bang.
Yeah, let's not forget that. First play
and first play just drop. So maybe if he can play this week, a nice little opportunity at a revenge game from the team that not only did he struggle in week 1 against them, they also were the team that the Packers traded up with to pick Christian Watson. So the Vikings had a chance to pick him, and we're like, no, we're okay with our division rival having him. And so a little bit of an opportunity for him to prove himself in that kind of aspect. Beyond that, Dad, let's move on to what's been going on for the Vikings since we played in that week 1 game. The Vikings have set. Do you want to take this one? You did the research on this one. You go ahead. They're 12. They're 12-3.
If you've been listening to what everybody else is talking about, what's going on in Vikings world, the big story is that some people might use the word fraudulent, But the Vikings have set the NFL record for one-score wins with 11.
The thing that I heard was they have 18 horseshoes stuck up their ass right now. It's the fun one that I heard.
I didn't remember who said that. But they're 11-0 in one-score games. Their only win of the season by more than one score was Week 1 against the Packers.
Gold star for us.
The Vikings are also only +5 in point differential for the whole season. So so if you think about that, their average margin of victory is less than half a point a game.
And I hate to nitpick.
12-3.
I hate to do this, be the person to nitpick wins, but people did it to us in 2019 when we were 13-3. So it's time for me to hit you right back with that.
We found out what.
And they were right. And they were right.
Play.
We were frauds. We got our asses kicked.
We made it to the NFC Championship game. We were able to beat the was that the Rams?
Seahawks that year.
That was the Seahawks year.
Yeah.
And then we got crushed because we matched up very poorly with a better team.
We know what it's like to win a lot of very close games and have people call us frauds and fight really hard and no, we're not. We just know how to win ugly games. Good teams win one-score games. No, wrong. But the Vikings have won a game where they were down 33 points at halftime. They've won a game on a 60-yard kick. They have squeaked by the Commanders. They won a game against the Bills where the Bills fumbled away the ball at their own goal line on a QB sneak.
Just trying to run out the clock.
The clock.
They would have kneeled on it if they didn't have to gain 1 yard.
Yeah, I mean, like we said, they are just bitten by the lucky bug right now. They have found just about every way to win. And people will say good teams find a way to win. Lucky teams find a way to have the other team lose against them sometimes, too.
Yeah, sometimes that is, let's just say it's not predictive.
Yes. And speaking of some more predictive stats, despite being 12-3 on the year compared to the Packers 7-8, the Packers are actually 10th in DVOA per Football Outsiders, while the Vikings are just 19th, which takes into account opponent strength, overall performance, etc., etc. Just two weeks ago, they, like we said, broke the record for largest comeback in the regular season ever, 33 points. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, and a lot of this is the reason that the Packers are actually favored by 3.5 points. So it is in Lambeau, which means essentially in a neutral field, they would call this a pick'em, despite the disparity in records. Kind of interesting to think about.
And in some ways, this is kind of similar to how the Vikings were recently underdogs to the Lions.
Yeah. Team that had a much worse record than them, on paper had a better DVOA though. And the Lions ended up winning that game because they had home field advantage, and they won it fairly convincingly. I think it ended up being a one-score game in the end. Did it? No, they had a drive that could have made it the one-score game.
It couldn't have been a one-score game because they have not
lost a one-score game.
But they lost 23-34.
Ah, yes, okay, yeah. I think they were driving to make it a one-score game, and then it didn't work out. But anyway, that's kind of what's going on in Vikings world. Dad, let's get into the crux of this breakdown, and let's start off with some, let's give the Vikings some credit. What makes them a tough matchup? Because they do have several, I would say, individual players and pieces of their team that are key, like the most important positions on an NFL team. They check a lot of those boxes.
Yep, and surprisingly enough, you and I have named the same player as maybe our number one priority because he might win Offensive Player of the Year this year.
I think he's the betting favorite right now, and that is the Justin Jefferson because he keeps kicking our ass, and so I have to respect it.
In case you didn't already know, we were talking about Justin Jefferson.
Like we said, last time they played,
the Packers were hoping to draft when he came out of LSU.
And last time they played, like we said, 9 catches for 184 yards and 2 touchdowns. That'll do it. I mean, you got our attention. Yeah, he has busted us up several times since he's entered the league. I think it's 3rd year in the league now. He's busted us up at least 4 times now. So.
Yep, and there's more. I could add some. Since we're talking about Justin Jefferson, I can add my notes on him as well.
Give your notes, because that was my main note.
Before you move on to your other players.
Go ahead.
He leads the league in receiving yards. And he's trying to be the first wide receiver to crack 2,000 yards in the season and break Calvin Johnson's record of 1,964. So, and Jefferson is at 1,756 with 2 games to go.
He might get that just against us.
Possibly,
At this rate,
if we cover him like we did last time,
exactly.
he is the number one ranked wide receiver by Football Outsiders and number two by PFF. His catch rate 71%, fifth among wide receivers in yards per target per Pro Football Reference, and he leads the league in receptions over 10 yards per Fantasy Pros.
He is like most of their offense. He's like a good, like over half of their offense is just give that man the ball because he's almost always open, and when he's not, he'll catch it. And he's also good with the ball in his hands. And he runs really good routes. And he has really good hands. Like he is probably, I would say, the most well-rounded receiver in the NFL. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, he's basically good at every aspect of the game.
Yeah, it's very annoying.
When he first came out, I was like, oh man, this guy's catch percentage is amazing.
Well, then he
tests like, oh wow, he's also really fast. He's just not a hands possession receiver.
And everyone was like, well, he's only a slot receiver. It's like, no, that's just because the other guys on the team couldn't play in the slot. He can actually just play anywhere he wants. Like it's that, like he's like that. It's very annoying. I'm very tired of playing against him, and it's only going to be another decade plus of this. Unless, hey, Justin Jefferson, if you ever want to pull a Stephon Diggs, force your way out. I would be totally okay with that. To anyone, I don't even care. You can go wherever you want, as long as it's not the Niners. As long as it's not the Niners, you can go wherever you want, buddy. I don't care. But anyway, or the Patriots. I don't like or the Cowboys. You know, I'm just gonna keep listing a few more.
Yes.
But anyway, yes, I think Justin Jefferson is rightfully so the favorite to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's their most valuable player for sure. He's incredibly difficult to stop, as we demonstrated all by ourselves. He is really tough, but he's not the only part of that team that is difficult to deal with and that makes them a tough matchup. The other thing that I think I want to highlight is that they have a really good edge rush duo, highlighted by a familiar face for us in Zadarius Smith and then his co-running mate, Danielle Hunter. Per PFF, 4 edge rushers hitting their 20% threshold of pass rush snaps. In terms of total pressures, Smith is tied for second. Hunter is 8th. They are the only team with 2 in the top 10 in the entire league. Both are also in the top 20 of pass rush win percentage per PFF. And Zadarius Smith has the 8th highest pass rush grade for them, and Hunter has the 19th highest pass rush grade for them. So probably, I would say, we were talking about this earlier on our drive, probably the best edge rush duo in the league, would you say, Dad? Or at least top 2 or top 3?
Could be. We were talking about this earlier and trying to think of names, but it's possible if you think of Micah Parsons as a pure edge, then
Cowboys,
Cowboys,
Parsons and Lawrence.
Yeah,
I think they're the only other ones I'd put in the conversation. There's several others that we talked about. Dolphins having Phillips and Chubb, and then we talked a bit about the Chargers having Mack and Bosa, but Bosa's been out most of the year. Raiders,
the same thing with the Bills with Rousseau and
but I would say
Miller, but
exactly.
Miller's hurt.
I would say the only one I would put in that tier is Micah Parsons and Dexter Lawrence. But anyway, 2 really great edge rushers. And then on the other side of the ball, they have 2 really solid bookend tackles. PFF has Darisaw, their left tackle, as their 2nd highest graded tackle in the entire league. And O'Neal, their right tackle, is the 6th highest graded tackle in the entire league, with O'Neal allowing 0 quarterback hits on the 2nd most snaps at right tackle in the league. Has not allowed the quarterback to be hit 1 time on his side, which is very impressive.
Yeah, that's pretty astounding. He's got zero hits in the entire year.
And just 9 pressures all year.
So he's having a fantastic year. Right, so that means that getting pressure off the edge is going to be
very difficult. Did you have anything else that made... What else do you think makes the Vikings a tough matchup?
So we mentioned Tomlinson already as one of their defensive tackles, and he's got some pass rush juice from the inside. He's like the 10th best graded interior defender by PFF in pass rush grade. And he's also, I think, decent against the run. And actually, I need to mention that Kirk Cousins, for all of the often deserved mockery, has actually been pretty good against the Packers the last 3 years.
Yeah.
His PFF grades against Packers last are like 82, 264.8. One of them was that crazy win game, and an 87. So 2 sort of very good bordering elite grades, 2 kind of slightly above average grade.
I am choosing to give all of the credit to Jefferson. I refuse to acknowledge anything else Kirk Cousins related.
And he has had before, but the year before, so that was the early game earlier this year. They only played one game against us last year, and the two in 2020. Then if you go back to 2019 and LaFleur's first year, those are pretty bad, and he had more sort of turnover-worthy plays.
So you're saying before Jefferson got there, he was not very good?
That's what I'm hearing. Well, be he didn't give us as many sort of interceptions that we dropped this last week one this year.
Yeah, he stopped. I need him to start doing these stupid bonehead plays where he just throws the ball to us. He hasn't done that. It feels like a long time. Like, Kirk, what's up? Well, I thought we were friends.
At least this year, not so much. But I think he's still.
Well, the thing, you know why he didn't do it this.
Very good.
You know why he didn't do it for us this year is because none of our guys were anywhere within 30 feet of a receiver in that first game.
Tried.
I was going to say he could have tried to. We'd never know. We would never have known if he was trying to throw it to us.
We were not close enough to pick off those misthrown balls.
Exactly.
But I mean, still, in terms of the whole, he just seems to lately been playing better against us than he's been playing against the rest of the league.
Yeah.
He's still kind of a mid-tier quarterback. He's like, 14th, kind of middle of the pack by PFF grade. And so I just feel like just very recently, he seems to have figured out a way to at least reduce the mistakes against us. So, but that's also, can always be something about small sample size in a single game format that could turn around any minute, and you could throw us, like 3 or 4.
Yeah, Kirk, I need some regression to the mean, buddy. I know this is not who you are. I need some regression to the mean, buddy. But anyway, those are kind of some things that we think that makes the Vikings a tough matchup in general, highlighted, of course, by Jefferson, their edge rushers, their tackles.
I should also mention, another player who's given us trouble in the past, and I have talked about it,
Cook.
Dalvin Cook.
He cooks against us. I mean, He hasn't had the best year. He's looked like he's lost a bit of a step, but I'll be damned if he doesn't run for 120 yards against us. Like he keeps it in reserve for when he's playing against us. It seems like, or we just. I
have some. I'll talk about him a little bit later because I did go through some of the numbers on him. But
you want to lead us. You want to lead us off? Is that what you have for how you think they're going to exploit us?
That's one of the things I have for how the Vikings will try to exploit the Packers. And
Take it away.
So I'll actually jump to that one since I already mentioned it. But I suspect the Vikings will try to run Cook based on previous success. Yeah. I looked back over the last 6 games that he played against us. He's averaged 117 yards from scrimmage against the Packers in the last 6 meetings, including 108 earlier this year. So it isn't just the previous coaching staff. They still did it to the Packers again this year with 90 running and 18 yards receiving. I didn't bother looking through all the touchdowns.
Why does it seem like
there's one bad week? Really,
but why does it seem like every single time we play them, he has at least one 60-yard play? Like every single time, he'll have just one massive play, and we'll just be like, so no one wants to tackle this guy on this play?
And you're probably thinking about the play where Savage comes running in. But is that Savage's rookie year? And takes a terrible angle and just gets beat for a 60 or 80-yard touchdown.
I wasn't even thinking about that one. I was thinking about the screen game in the wind game where they dump it off in the middle, and he went for 50 yards.
Oh, there's that one too. Yeah. So he's really only had
so many to choose from.
But in the last 6 games, he's had one bad one where he had 16 yards from scrimmage. And that was week 17 last year, where it was, the Sean Mannion QB game.
Mm-hmm. That was his last 6 games against us. It was it Mannion? I think you might be right. I think it was Mannion.
I think that was the one that Cousins missed last year with COVID?
Yes.
Whatever reason.
Injury? I don't remember. He wasn't playing. But anyway. Yeah. So, Cook always cooks against us, it seems like.
And so, but I do have, there are some reasons, I think that, so the reasons from history, I think they'll try it, but the Vikings O-line.
They've been at running the ball this year.
Yeah, and they're bad at like sort of power success, one of the Football Outsiders metrics, where it's your ability to get a first down or touchdown on third or fourth and short, like 1 or 2 yards. 30th in power success and dead last in stuff percentage. So that's like runs that don't gain anything, or essentially again, like I forget if it's 0 or 1.
Yeah.
And so they've been bad at both of those, of course. And the Packers D line is last in stuff percentage, the ability to stuff the opponent. So the
we got another stoppable force versus a movable object, folks.
Right.
We're back at it again.
Whose bad unit will prevail? So I think that's why we'll see the Vikings give it a try, even though they haven't been very good at it.
Yeah, and I mean, we have just been so bad at stopping the run for so long. But I think beyond that Cook thing, they like we said before, I think they're going to hammer that Justin Jefferson button. That is the easy button for their offense. That's what I have, at least, for how I think they're going to try and exploit us. It worked last time. There's no reason to think that they won't at least try it again this time. And
is this going to be like,
offense.
you like hit the button enough times you get like the speed run? Or
exactly.
Whatever power up you get, depending on what game you're playing.
Yeah, and then the other thing I think is something that was not an aspect of their offense the last time we played is TJ Hawkinson, who they acquired since we last played them. He's been a major factor of their offense. He's getting like 8.5 targets every single game since moving to the Vikings. And 42% of his receiving yards are coming after the catch. He's not getting as much yards after the catch. It's actually substantially less with the Vikings than he did with the Lions, but he's just getting used a whole lot more with the Vikings than he did with the Lions. He is a player the Packers are familiar with, having played in the NFC North for the past few years, just albeit in Detroit. But the amount, like the usage amount that he gets is far more now that he's in Minnesota. And I think he presents some problems for the Packers as like them having a much more reliable release valve and underneath presence than they did with when we played them in week 1 and when we've played them in the past. The fact that they're able to allow several Vikings analysts I've listened to speak on other Packers podcasts have talked about how they're able to now run Jefferson on deeper routes with the threat of Hawkinson underneath as a bit of a more efficient and more threatening dump down and check down for Kirk, because he's pretty good with the ball in his hands. He's a pretty good tackle breaker. He was coming out of Iowa. That's what made him a top 10 pick. And he presents a new dynamic to their offense that the Packers have not had to face yet. Like I said, getting like 9 targets a game. He's something I'm keeping an eye on for how I think that they're going to take advantage of us, because we have struggled with those kind of guys in motion underneath and tackling all year. And then I think that their edge rushers against our tackles coming off injury is going to be a little tough, because Nyman with that bad shoulder, and then Bakhtiari hasn't played since week 13. So those are kind of how I think that they're going to try and take advantage of us going forward.
Yeah. I mean, I see that we've got both of our starting inside linebackers back, able to play.
Yep. Exactly.
We're
That's
not
good.
down one, which that'll help a little bit, I think, with the Hawkinson thing. I think the other thing about some sort of style points, I think the Vikings throw a lot as a team.
They throw a lot.
Is third on the year in pass attempts, behind only Brady and Herbert, and they're third in the league in pass play percentage. So I think we can expect a very pass-heavy script by the Vikings in this game, even though they might be able to mix it up. I think they'll probably revert to their normal patterns at some point. Will they be able to take advantage of some of the Packers' weakest O-line metric, which is their power success rate? The Packers' failure on short yardage and 3rd and 4th downs, which tracks exactly with the Packers' lack of success in these downs. How they've had trouble converting, on 3rd down or scoring in short yardage goal to go situations. And will the Vikings, will that help them in getting the Packers off the field and forcing them to punt? Maybe that might be something that the Packers will be able to exploit. Sorry, the Vikings will be able to exploit the Packers in and getting them off the field.
Just our situational offense all year has been so poor, and I feel like it's just such a glaring flaw in this team right now.
Yep, and so another thing I think they'll do in terms of alignments is, I expect to see Zadarius Smith lined up in the center over Josh Myers to take advantage of what I think is generally considered to be currently the weakest link in the Packers' offensive line.
Man, poor Myers. Myers, man.
And Zadarius has been, did it a lot for the Packers where they put him over the center. We got Bakhtiari and Nyman have both been doing very well in pass block win rate. Runyon is mostly been playing well. Gives them a couple points, but not very much, and very rarely gets any penalties. And Elton Jenkins is playing really well. Once he kind of got to the 1 year mark, or even the 11 month mark since his ACL, he started playing really well. So Myers has been the weakest link on
He's
the line
the one
so
they're
far.
Looking at. He's the one that they've zeroed in on. I'm almost certain. Get a good night's sleep, Josh, because you're going to need it, buddy.
Yep. So I think that's another way they'll be trying to exploit the Packers.
Yeah, and especially in a game where I think we're going to need to be able to run the ball. I mean, we're going to need to be able to move the ball, and losing yards on first and second down running the ball is not going to be conducive to that when you have a terrible third down offense.
No, we don't want to get into third and long and let them,
Tee
send the
off.
house.
Exactly. Anyway, though, the Packers definitely have some avenues, however, to win this game, which is kind of what we want to touch on next. How we usually go through this is end on a bit more of a upbeat note. Dad, let's talk a little bit about there are definitely some ways the Packers can take advantage of the Vikings in this game.
Yeah, I have I have a list of actually quite a list of things.
Yeah, hit us
Um,
with it.
so the Vikings have, even though this, I think they're going to try it, the run game against the Packers. They've
Yeah,
not been good at it this year.
they
They're only
haven't.
26th in DVOA per Football Outsiders as a running offense. So they may not be able to actually take advantage of the Packers' primary weakness. Their defense is also not good and have been, I think, worse lately, giving up like tons of points to bad teams. And they're only 22nd by DVOA, and the pass defense is 24th,
Mhm.
and been lit up on multiple occasions. And even though
Yeah.
they've got two good edge rushers, their sack rate is overall as a team is not high.
hmm
Um, they're
Yeah, I feel like they seem to be getting a lot of pressures, but the pass rush seems to be pretty much just them, and then
mhm.
not a lot beyond them. I mean, they have two very good star pass rushers who are both elite at what they do, but beyond them, it kind of seems like they're holding down the fort on that front.
Yeah, and they're not the kind of defense which I think stylistically has been giving the Packers so much trouble the last couple of years, where teams are like really good against the run and make it really hard for the Packers to sort of run their normal offense by being able to run the ball to set up the pass. They're just kind of middle of the pack as a running defense, and so they're in that respect they're not built to take advantage of well, not take advantage, but disrupt what the Packers want to do, I should say.
Yeah, and speaking of their defense, like you said, their defense is pretty meh overall, 24th against the pass. And part of that is what I have written down is their secondary is old, slow, and bad. Like
Yep.
you're either the Packers should be able to take deep shots against this secondary, especially if Watson is playing, but even if he's not. I mean, their starters are Patrick Peterson, who's 32 years old and looks it. Harrison Smith, who's 33 years old, still a good player, but not light on his feet anymore. Cameron Bynum, who ran a 4.58 second 40 coming out of college, and Duke Shelley, who ran a 4.51 second 40 coming out of college. They got no speed on the back end at all. So if you can protect long enough against those edge rushers and you can trust your tackles and you can keep Mercedes in there to give it a little help, they should not be able to stick with Watson. They probably shouldn't even be able to stick with Dobbs. Like, they are slow and old in the secondary, and they've shown it a lot of times this year, which is part of the reason they have the 24th ranked pass defense in the league.
Yeah, and by PFF coverage, their coverage grade is 20th in the league.
Yeah. I mean, the secondary has looked really, really rough all year, especially since they lost Dantzler for a lot of the time this year. They lost Andrew Booth, who was their second round pick this year, has missed a lot of time. They've been, and then, I mean, they still have Chandon Sullivan in the slot, familiar face, but he's not particularly fast either. Like, they don't have a lot of speed on the back end.
Nope.
What else did you have for ways the Packers could possibly take
So,
advantage here?
so I have some other things to say about. So their offensive line, so they have two really good tackles. Their interior, I think, has been so poor that it
Yeah.
has kind of made the entire unit as a whole grade out poorly. So they're 28th in pass. Well, sorry, 25th in run block win rate, and only 21st in pass block win rate.
And I've seen
So
their guard Ingram step on Kirk Cousins' own, like step on his own quarterback's foot multiple times this year and knock him over. If you want to do that again this week, we'll take it.
that would be good. Maybe you can even drop the ball too. And then the Packers, their offensive line has been getting better and better. And it's like
hmm
they're second overall now by DVOA, seventh in adjusted sack rate, and really good in run blocking. And the Packers, you may know these numbers about that. The Packers passing defense right now is eighth.
Yeah, it's
And in the
really
last
high, and especially over the last 5
they're
weeks.
second or something over the last 5 weeks.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird to think about that we've been so critical of the way Barry has called some of these soft coverages, but statistically it's working, which is just crazy to think about.
Yeah, their run defense is still terrible.
Oh yeah, well, it is what it is, Can't have everything, I suppose.
Yep.
Did you have anything else for how Packers can take advantage?
I think I've mentioned most of the things about how the Packers. Yeah, I think I've got all of it. I think they can run.
Yeah, and I think
on the Vikings,
like you said, with the interior O-line of the Vikings, I was just going to add this should be an opportunity for Kenny, Jern Reed, and Devontae Wyatt, who I would love to see. He had a season high in snaps and snap percentage last week. I'd love to see even more of him this week. I feel like he's earned it. They've talked about him in pressers, talking about how they've really liked the work he's put in and that they just generally bring D linemen along slowly. Why? At this point, why? Just give him some snaps, let him learn on the job. He'll make mistakes. It's okay. They need him out there. They need some more impactful players along that interior. It's a good matchup for them, and I think they should have an opportunity to take advantage of it. Going beyond that, Dad, what specifically do you want to see from the Packers in this game?
So, as you mentioned, I want to see the Packers pressure Cousins up the middle where the offensive line is weakest.
Yeah, I even have that. I want them to send blitzes up the middle in how I want them to do it.
I have that too. I have pressure Cousins middle, Clark and Wyatt, and blitzes by Walker.
Yeah,
and this is the weakest part of the Vikings O line, and they'll be running out a backup at center.
Yeah,
who's well below average by PFF grades, and he's got a decent Austin Schlottman. He's got a decent number of snaps. It's not like it's a small sample size. He's got 231 snaps.
Make their center think and set protections and make it complicated for him. Make that interior mentally exhausted because it's just as much a physical thing as it is a mental thing, especially at the center position.
Yep. And then I think we have a couple of overlapping things. You have the blitz up the middle, and I have the rush middle. I have run the ball to the outside of Za'Darius' pass rushing lane and combine that with screens behind him to take advantage of the fact that he's surely going to be extra amped up to try and dive in for the QB sack. And we've seen
it for years firsthand. He is hyper aggressive getting upfield, and other teams were able to take advantage of us running right at him. Why don't we do that?
The 2019
Raheem Mostert is on repeat.
Yeah. Za'Darius is diving into the middle, and Mostert is dashing
he's
around
either
the outside.
Diving into the middle, or he's working way upfield outside the tackle, and the gap, the seat, the B gap is wide open.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, we saw it for years, so there's no reason we should. Exactly.
And you expect him to be ultra aggressive because he's really going to want to show out, I would think.
In Lambeau, you don't think he wants to get at least 2 or 3 of those things? He is going to be gunning for sacks.
He's got, you know what he's got? He's got a special T-shirt on in that jersey.
He does.
Dying to show to the fans. So he's going to want that sack so bad.
Do you think it says captain, or do you think it says what do you think it says?
Captain Z. I don't know.
Yeah, it's got to be something like that. But yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that. For me, I really need to see them take those shot plays against the secondary, like we talked about. Like you said, blitzing and running at Z. The other thing I think is any high leverage situation, third downs, red zone. Justin Jefferson needs bracket coverage. He needs additional attention. They need. There's no reason not to. He killed you last time. You need to give him the respect that he has earned by torching you every time you haven't done this. I mean, what is it? Jair Alexander was out here saying that he had a fluke. That week 1 was a fluke. What was it? Kyle Brandt on Good Morning Football said he had 9 flukes for 184 flukes and 2 flukes, which was hilarious. But he's not wrong. It's hard to call it a fluke when he just torched you over and over again. They can't let their ego. They need to give additional attention to him. They need to.
Right. So put somebody on him and then bracket him.
Yes.
Over the top.
I'm tired.
If you get beat
by Adam Thielen and KJ Osborne, it's okay. It's okay.
Oh, but what I was going to say is, if you get beat by the other team's obvious number one weapon because you don't put enough attention. That is a catastrophic failure.
You need to stop option 1 before you worry about options 2 through 5. Like, sure, TJ Hawkinson is dangerous. Sure, Adam Thielen is dangerous. Sure, KJ Osborne has had a really nice year as a third receiver. Got to stop number 1 first. You got to stop the big guy first. But anyway, moving on, Dad. Who are some players for the Packers you keep an eye on?
I did have one more thing.
Go ahead.
It was kind of similar to like the shot plays. I want to see them passing crossers to receivers on the run across the middle of the field to take advantage of the speed. So after the catch, so that somebody in stride, not like going out, turning and sitting down, and then go. I want to see somebody hitting the ball, hitting with the ball in the move crossing across the middle of the field, and then just taking off past their slow secondary. Take advantage of the speed discrepancy.
Exactly.
By not just with shot plays, but by getting them on the move.
It's a slow secondary.
Defense.
Yeah, it's a slow secondary. But anyway, Dad, let's get down to winding down this game. Players to watch for the Packers. I have a couple. You have a few. Lead us off.
So I put first, like as we mentioned before, Clark and Wyatt. I'm going to lump together. So the middle of
put some respect on Reed's name, Dad. He's coming off a great game.
That is true. He did have a great game, but I expect to see Kenny wreck shop because he has against the Vikings in the past, and he's coming off of his best game in a while, if not the year. And I really want to see what Devontae Wyatt can do when he gets a regular game's worth of snaps.
Yeah.
And then I want to see what Romeo Doubs can do with or without Christian Watson in this game. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to be very interested to see how Jair is playing and where he's lining up in this game.
Yeah, where he's deployed.
How that's going to play out.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping we can get another interview after this game like last week's game.
That was one of the best interviews I've ever seen. Go check out the Father Son Packer on Twitter if we retweeted that interview if you want to go check it out. It's of Jair walking through his pick in the second half against Tua. It's a very good interview. It's a lot of fun. And come check out that Twitter. Just a quick second to pitch all of our socials. Come check us out on Twitter. We tweet when we have new episodes, any news and analysis, any injury notes. We always have it there. If you enjoy what you hear, come give us a follow. Once again, that's at Father Son Packer. Come give us a subscription on YouTube. If you enjoy what you hear, it would really help our numbers. Father Son Packers podcast on YouTube. And you can find our podcast on any other podcast platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, etc. If you want to come check us out anywhere else, we would really appreciate it. For me, my players to watch as we wind down here are Josh Myers. Like we said, he's probably the weak link on the offensive line that they're going to target, and that Zadarius specifically is going to target. He has to have a good game for them to succeed. And then the other one is Darnell Savage, because he seems to have gotten his job back after Ford got benched a bit last week. Let's see how he bounces back, because I think a lot of times there were a lot of communication errors, specifically in his zone from him. And the coaching staff and him have both talked about how he's worked really hard to earn their trust back and earn his spot back, and that they're really happy with what he's done, how he's put his head down. And he wasn't happy about getting benched, but he didn't sit and feel bad for himself. He put the work in and got his spot back. And so I'm really interested to see how that works for him this game, because they're going to need a good game from everyone in the secondary. They're not going to have any room for these lapses, these mental lapses, these coverage issues like they've had previously. They need a complete game from the secondary, and having him back in the fold is going to be good, because they need that elite athleticism back there, and they need him to have a good game. Dad, should we move on to score predictions?
Well, I was just going to say that if we can get end of 2020 season Savage for the rest of this year, it would make a huge difference.
Huge difference. Yes, I totally agree. I think that he's so talented. If he can put it together and make that step that he hadn't been able to make until now, it would just be so good for the Packers, especially because they're locked into that fifth-year option for next year.
Yep.
So, Dad, score prediction.
So I have the Packers helping the Vikings maintain their 11-0 record in one-score games by beating them 31-20.
Nice. I think I've got the Packers winning 35-28. I think it's going to be a high-scoring game.
Okay.
In
Packers
Lambeau,
have
it's
been averaging like almost 27 points a game in the last like 5 or 6 games.
going to be
So
in Lambeau. It's not supposed to be that cold, though. It's only supposed to be
no, it's
like
going to be
30-something.
mid-30s for the high, mid-upper 30s for the high, and maybe
28 for
mid-20s
the low, but it's going to be daytime. Sun's going to be out. It's not going to be that cold. I'm expecting
Well,
a
I think
higher scoring game.
It's going to be. Sun's going to go down before the game's over.
I thought we had a 10 a.m. game.
No, I believe it is like 3:25 for the kickoff.
You are right. Yes. 3:25 local time.
It is.
Yes. Yeah. Good catch. But anyway, thanks so much for joining us, everyone. This has been our pregame for the Packers-Vikings game in Week 17. If you like what we heard, we do 2 podcasts every week, a pregame and a postgame. So come check us out. Come check our postgame out after the Vikings game, hopefully after a win. Hopefully the Packers control their own destiny. Reminder that if the Commanders lose to the Browns this weekend and the Packers beat the Vikings, they officially control their own destiny, win and in against the Lions in Week 18. But let's not get it too far ahead of ourselves. Let's only control what we can control, and that is this game against the Vikings. You know, it's always fun to get wins against division rivals. You're at home in Lambeau. Let's go take care of business. Go Pack, go.
Go Pack, go.